My name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Museum Open House. This ongoing series features and highlights many of the outstanding museums and other cultural institutions. The main purpose of most programs is to inform viewers about current and upcoming exhibits, various programs, resources, and other opportunities that are available for the general public. Today we're fortunate to have as our guests Craig Gibson and Dennis Hlynsky. Craig is a Catholic chaplain at the Lawrence General Hospital, and he's also an avid bird watcher and photographer. Dennis is professor at the Rhode Island School of Design and a highly accomplished artist and designer. Together, they're both here to share with us fascinating exhibits that are currently on display at the Essex Art Center located in Lawrence. During the program, we'll find out why and how these exhibits came about. We'll go on a behind-the-scenes tour, and in the process, we'll come to better understand and appreciate the winter phenomenon of having thousands upon thousands, 25,000 crows migrate to the general Lawrence area, and how this has led to some engaging artwork and ornithological study. Let's start by meeting our guest and then finding out about the exhibits at the Essex Art Center. Welcome. Delighted both of you able to be here today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
I had such a fabulous exhibit, learned so much about crows, appreciated the wonderful art, both of you and others, and eager to hear more and have you share with viewers. But before we jump right into that, I think it would be of interest just to hear a little bit about your backgrounds and maybe how your interest in crows came about. Craig?
Well, thanks again, Jay, for the invitation to be here and to participate today. I've been a long-time bird photographer, and in my day-to-day work up in Lawrence, have had a chance since 2011 to observe and document and photograph a pair of nesting peregrine falcons in the Ayer Mill clock tower, which is very near where we have spent time watching the crows. Last fall, a phone call came in from Dana Fox. Dana and Bob Fox have been intermittently watching the crows up in Lawrence for the last couple of years. And Dana was in the process of beginning to write an article that was going to be placed in Bird Observer, a bi-monthly birding journal that is distributed throughout New England. And looking ahead, Dana realized that she needed a bird photographer with some experience that could help capture that. And so since last October, from then until about April, and then this September until now, Dana and Bob, her husband Bob, and I have been out many, many nights observing, tracking, and photographing the crows and their behavior, and it has just been fascinating, and it becomes more interesting each time we go out.
I can see that. I can see that. Dennis, yourself, please.
Well, about 10 years ago, I began to photograph birds, flocks of birds in particular. I was attracted to the spectacle of large groups of animals that were moving together, you know, from ants to fruit flies that fly in the kind of really drunken sort of, you know, manner that they fly in, and started photographing and developed a kind of technique to show the trails of the birds. I don't particularly think of myself as an avid bird watcher, although it's beginning to be that I can't deny it anymore.
It's good to be open about that. Craig or Dennis, do we have any sense why all these thousands of crows come to the Lawrence area?
I'll take first stab at it. This phenomenon known as a winter crow roost has been documented by writings of ornithologists going back as early as 1790. And typically they had these overnight communal winter crow roosts had taken place more in rural areas. Over the last many decades, they have become much more common in urban downtown areas, coast to coast. There are still many questions as to why these crows gather in large numbers, 5,000, 10,000,
Yeah.
100,000s, and previously in the millions. There's no real clear idea as to why that might happen. Some of the thinking is that cities might avoid primarily an opportunity to congregate in an area where there's some ambient lighting for predator avoidance, protection against predators. Some thinking is that it might be because the cities provide a bit of a heat island effect. Jury is still out on that. The jury is still out also on these large urban gatherings of crows in large numbers in the wintertime, because there may be an exchange of information as to where food sources are located. They do not come in and feed in the cities at nighttime. They forage during the day, and they return back at night in these large numbers. So that's some of the thinking.
Wow, very interesting.
I can take a second stab at
Please,
it.
please.
There's a very famous study at Harvard that studied sort of why birds flock together. And in the end, the study said they do it because they want to. And I think that that's probably it more than anything. It's certainly, they probably migrate a couple hundred miles from the cold Canadian north to the cold climate of Lawrence, but it's warmer. You know, the kind of the why, you know, I ask, you know, why do people go into stadiums and watch football games?
Yeah.
You know, it's just, you know, the culture kind of demands it after a while. And I think they do it because they want to.
Well, if there's one thing I learned from visiting and reading and references that you've both given me, is how much smarter crows are than I and maybe others thought they were. So I think there could be very much something to what you're saying there, Dennis.
I mean, asking, you know, specifically, you know, or generalizing, you know, that they come to, you know, a particular place for a particular reason, is, you can watch and observe and make some deductions, but ultimately, I can't get inside the head of a crow.
Right.
And you know, I think it remains a mystery.
Craig, how do the different exhibits come about?
So after a fascinating time last winter, with regular nightly outings, tracking, observing, photographing, taking very good field notes, sharing those, posting those, it prompted a look at this phenomenon. Where does it happen elsewhere? There are a number of other larger and smaller cities where these winter crow roosts. So this is after the breeding season. Both adults and younger birds migrate probably 300 to 600 miles from northern parts of the United States and Canada and northeast of Lawrence, and they come in. So with some research on what is being done elsewhere, we looked at some of the possibilities of how to bring this out to the broader community. For those who have a familiarity, Lawrence is the poorest city in the state of Massachusetts, maybe the 30th poorest city per capita in the United States. And so one thought was, we don't have any negatives with the crows in Lawrence. Could we create this as a positive? That led to doing some homework, particularly Lancaster, Pennsylvania is a very good model. They've done some very similar community types of things. I had been aware of the Essex Art Center. It's less than a mile from the hospital. I contacted Kathy McLaurin, who at the time was serving as the interim acting executive director of the Art Center, and she extended an invitation to come in, and we went back and forth on what an exhibit might look like. Flash forward, she had seen the crows, she was aware of them, and she thought it might be very interesting in January and February through March to look at pulling an exhibit together. And we talked about photography. She was aware of Dennis's work and thought there might be an opportunity to bring in community artists as well.
No, three wonderful aspects that complement each other so well. Well, let's jump in. Appreciate that background, but we have some real good stuff here now, and these are some of the photographs. Would either of you comment on what we're seeing, and maybe even if these are some of yours, Greg, how they came about?
Well, I'll just go first because that's one of my photos. So, it was funny. This afternoon, I stopped at the Art Center at about 3:45, and I met a number of high school students from Lawrence that are members of the Green Team, part of Groundwork Lawrence, with a big emphasis on environmental and conservation work in the city of Lawrence. This was one of the pictures that we stopped and took a look at. Dennis will be very familiar with this view and with this location. This is on South Canal Street. It's a dirt road. It's kind of an access road off of Merrimack Street. This is the west-facing side of the New Balance complex on the corner of South Union and Merrimack Street. And in the that steel exhaust kind of chimney, just to the right of that is an open window where the peregrine falcons nest every year.
Oh.
In this spot, we would typically set up many nights to look at the staging crows that would come from other nearby locations, and they would fly in front of us in a northwestern direction and go around the corner onto the north side of this factory building to begin the roosting process for the evening. You can see on the clock it's about 5:30. It's probably 20 or 30 minutes before sunset. It might be a little less than that, and they were starting to move into the final roost location.
Oh, what a fabulous shot.
This would have been taken months later. As you can see from the clock, it looks to be about 4:15, 4:20.
Yes.
And at that point, the sunset was probably close to that time, a little bit later, and in much larger numbers in this photo, taken from a little bit farther back and across the street, looking northeast. This is huge number of crows beginning to move from staging location into the final roost. The photo here, the duck bridge runs between Union and South Union Street. This is looking southwest from the west side of the duck bridge over the Merrimack River. The crows are in the river birch trees and silver maples on the north side of the New Balance factory building. And this is typically where they would settle in for the overnight roost location September, October, November, and December until the middle part of January. No ice, no snow. It came later this year. New Balance building in the background and the setting sun, skyline in the background.
Capture that nicely.
This is another photo taken much darker, but pretty much the same kind of view. You can see the crows with the lit windows in the background.
Yes, very
decorating
nice.
the trees like Christmas ornaments. This is a scene that Dennis would have seen many times. These are crows flying in from the northeast. The building there is 25 Marston Street. It's a little downriver to the east from the duck bridge, and just large number of crows, moving up towards the final roost for the evening.
Nice. And there's a nice close-up.
That's looking west, the New Balance building to the left. Crows heavily settled into the trees that you can see there, and one of the crossed arches, in as part of the bridge superstructure.
Nice. This is a fabulous shot.
So this is, Dennis would appreciate this. It's very, so immediately adjacent to the west side of the New Balance building on South Canal Street is a National Grid substation. And transformers and generators and other equipment that they may not even be at liberty to tell me exactly what's there. It's off limits, don't even think of trespassing. So there was a spot in the fence where there was an ability to take a photo. You have crows on the ground, mostly American crows, largely fish crows, which will tend to perch on the wires. The American crows don't.
I found that fascinating
That's
to
part
find
of
out
how we know
about.
that there's fish crows. And they're working their way here. They also would land and occupy similar space right next door in a truck depot. So it's a fairly well-lit area, some nice ambient light, and the trees along the Merrimack River are just in the background on the far side of the property, providing an idea of what it looks like after, before it gets totally dark.
Well, we'll take a break. We have some other wonderful photographs to share. But Dennis, I'd like you to speak maybe a little bit about your work, your videography work, and then we're fortunate to have a wonderful clip to share with viewers as well.
Thank you. Teaching at RISD is really challenging. Students challenge you and to think about video and making video in very, very new ways. I'd always been interested in places where television monitors show up, whether it be in bars or in waiting rooms or like these odd places. And I always thought that it would be a pretty wonderful place to make work for, so that the person who's coming to look at the work can spend as much time with it as they want and kind of move on, very much like a painting or something like that. But that the idea is that the movement of the work would be the thing that would be very attractive. And so I began a number of years ago looking for these spectacular moments. I think of them as spectacular moments, and would mount shows in galleries where the work was on a loop, so you could come in and spend time with it and kind of move on. Toward that, I developed this technique of creating these trails. Kathy, the director at Essex, saw a show of mine in New Bedford probably 4 years ago.
Wow.
And she called me up out of the blue and said, would you like to, come to Essex and, we're doing a show on crows. And I said, well, I don't have any work on crows, so, but I could make some. And started coming up to Essex mid-November and would stay for a day, stay overnight, go out and shoot the next day. And I spent a number of trips that way. And got to know Lawrence as a really interesting city. It has a very fascinating history and really curious food as well.
Nice, nice. Well, I know the first part of the clip we're going to see has you're narrating it. Could you just give us a little intro of what the whole clip is going to be about that we're going to enjoy now?
This is a clip that I made for the Essex Art Center to kind of advertise the show. I get a lot of questions when people look at the work about how I do it and why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it seems very bizarre to some people. It's not a story necessarily. It's not a cartoon. It's just a visual spectacle. And so I felt obliged to address that toward the beginning. And then in the later part of the clip, there are some outtakes from the show.
Nice, nice.
And you can see what the work is like.
Well, I think spectacle is a wonderful thing. I think viewers will shortly see how captivating your work is. So let's take advantage and roll in the clip now, please.
I can't say that I'm a bird watcher any more than I'm a people watcher or an insect watcher. But I do love the way birds fly. The sense of them pushing against the air is just really wonderful. I especially love it when birds gather in flocks. Starlings that, you look up at telephone wires and you see them all day long, and we don't think anything of them. But when you stop and watch how they fly, or how pigeons fly, it's really quite miraculous.
It's amazing to watch it.
You can keep watching it and watching it.
Much like the photographs of Muybridge, Barbara Morgan, and Bernice Abbott, or the painting of Duchamp's nude descending a staircase, a desire to make the work about the motion of things, and the motion of things that are much too fleeting to understand. To that end, I've developed a post-production technique that I call frame stacking, and it involves making the background clear and then stacking multiple frames, or multiple movies, one on top of the other. And in this way, you can see the tracings of things. I was really happy and honored when the Essex Art Center asked me if I would participate in an exhibit on crows in Lawrence, Mass. These clips were shot in a cemetery, the Immaculate Conception Cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
There's a cemetery in Providence where crows congregate late in the afternoon, early in the afternoon, like 2 o'clock. I think that the kind of the openness of the cemetery and the kind of singular tall trees allow them a place to roost and keep watch.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of acorn trees, and they like the nuts, which is really quite nice. One of the things that I loved about doing this project was that the crows don't congregate in numbers until it starts to really get toward dusk. And you, as a photographer, that sort of magic hour, watching sunset, I came up to Lawrence with my brother, who's Canadian, and I said, come on up and do this with me. And we were waiting around on the bridge for, getting cold and whatever. And the sun set, and these crows kind of came out, and it was just an awesome thing to see,
groups of 1,000 birds or 5,000 birds.
What a
sailing
sight we're
off
seeing
into
right
the sunset,
here. Yeah.
and the light is beautiful, and the
Colors.
the colors are
Sunlight clouds.
amazing.
Right
Yeah.
there, right there.
And the blackness of these birds that form this real contrast between the birds and the sky. And then the sun goes down and it gets colder, and they take to the trees, and at this point they appear to just go to sleep. They stop cawing, they stop calling to each other, and
They get very quiet.
they get alarmingly quiet.
Wow.
Almost as if they're hiding.
Spooky, yeah.
They've just turned this invisible blanket in the trees, this cloak of invisibility.
Wow. What's been the reaction and feedback you've gotten from clips like this that are on the exhibit?
The feedback has generally been positive. The questions are always, why are you doing this? How are you doing this?
How are you doing it?
How
Yeah.
are you doing this? And it's really quite, it's not a hard process. It's a computationally expensive process. So, 5 minutes of video will possibly take a day to render. So the kind of the processing time eats up a lot of hours. I was really lucky. I had done a show
in Wyoming earlier and sold a couple of pieces, which was nice, and allowed me to buy a camera that isn't the sharpest camera in the world, but it is wonderful in low light, and will record at 250 frames per second. And so without that, I don't think that I could have made these.
Well, it's fabulous, and I think if people go to the Essex Art Center website, they can see a clip such as this and enjoy it any number of times, in addition to making their way to the Art Center, of course, by March 15th, when the show closes. We're fortunate to have a few more minutes and a couple more photographs. So, Craig, another wonderful, totally different shot here.
So, Jay, this is a photo from the O'Leary Bridge, which is on Route 28. Along the Merrimack River in downtown Lawrence, there are 4 bridges from Route 495 to the Duck Bridge, Casey Bridge, and then this is the most westerly bridge in downtown, and just west of the bridge is the Great Stone Dam. This entire setup was critical to the hydroelectric power that was central to the running of the mills back in the day.
Yeah.
So this was taken after sunset, cloudy night. I think it was about January 7th or 8th, 2018, looking west upriver, and Riverfront State Park is off to the left, and what you see here are thousands of crows on the ice. They're staging before going into the final roost, and on this particular night, they went into the roost on the south side of the river by the experiment station, which is right nearby. Just really spectacular. Wow. And you can see how frozen the ice is below the dam. It was a really chilly stretch.
Yeah. I can't believe that the crows think of this as the warm South.
So they do migrate at least 300 miles up to 600 plus miles, and in all probability for the stretch of the winter season, it's warmer than it is from where they come from. But this is clearly a very cold stretch.
It's all perspective. That's good. And maybe we'll slip in one more very quickly.
So the whole process is they gather overnight and they quiet down in enormous numbers, and then before first light they start to make noise, and that the intensity of the vocalizations grow considerably. They then disperse before sunrise itself. They fully disperse and disband, and they go to the foraging grounds that may be 10, 20, 30, 40 miles away. When they come back in at night, the 45 minutes to disperse in the morning, on average they take about 2 hours to go from the most remote foraging areas back in. And they don't do a beeline as they do when they go out in the morning. They hopscotch their way in, and they join larger, increasingly larger groupings. So this was a staging area just to the west of the boathouse along the Merrimack River, an area that's been very popular for staging. And what I was able to see that night is a burst of crows coming out of a bunch of trees as they started to move to the final roost.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap up. I do want to bring people back, call their attention to the community aspect of an exhibit as well to take advantage of, and definitely encourage people to see the work of the 5 photographers and your exquisite work, Dennis, as well, until March 15th, the Essex Art Center. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, Jay.
So interesting and informative. Also want to thank those of you watching for joining us, and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.
Got your personal references, high school diploma or equivalent.
Skip the drama. Get your diploma.
It's right there.
Find free adult education classes at finishyourdiploma.
Welcome to Understood.org,
a free online resource for parents of kids with learning and attention issues, with personalized recommendations, tools, and expert advice.